Some of you have heard this before. I see you, Mariska and Hannah and Carmen and Mark, but just for anybody else who hasn't, I'm just going to go through the intro. I'm Julie Thomasis. I'm a board member of Promise Neighborhoods Lehigh Valley and an advocate for marginalized communities in the Lehigh Valley. I want to extend a radical welcome to you all and to PNLV's Health Equity Fellowship. First, I want to thank the Dorothy Ryder Poole Healthcare Trust and Ryder Poole Foundation for their support of this program and their ongoing contribution over many years to health equity across our community. The PNLV Health Equity Fellowship is centered in the idea that wellness is a basic human right and that everyone is worthy of a fair and just opportunity to be as healthy as possible. We recognize that locally significant obstacles to optimum health exist, such as racism, power imbalances, and poverty. These oppressive factors, as well as inequities across the social determinants of health, substantially and disparately impact the health and life outcomes of marginalized and vulnerable communities. This is the last of 8 webinars. I hope you all have found them interesting and informative. This webinar will have 2 presenters and cover key social determinants of health. The webinar will last for about an hour and a half, and the presentations will be followed by 30 minutes of Q&A. The webinar will be recorded and available for you to review. Our presenters are both experts in their field and leaders and representatives of our community, and they will share with you the inequities, the challenges, and the opportunities in our health system. My reminder to you today is as I do on every Monday, is knowledge is power. This webinar, the topic of this webinar is the house we live in, the need for affordable housing with Councilwoman Gerlach and community member Jeani Garcia. Ola Onawale is our Health Equity Fellowship Project Director. She's our webinar manager and will facilitate the Q&A. I'm just going to read you some brief bios. Jeani Garcia is a community leader and social activist with over 7 years of helping her community. She's a Pennsylvania licensed health insurance producer. Is it producer, Jeani?
Yes, ma'am.
A provider. Is it provider or producer?
Producer.
Director with the Ortiz Arc Foundation, credible messenger for Promise Neighborhoods Lehigh Valley, and a mother and grandmother. After having lost her precious son, Kareem, to gun violence in 2001, is it?
12.
I'm sorry, it's my typo. Jeani has dedicated her life to helping teenagers and young adults transition out of gangs and connect them with people who love them and resources to support them. She has also started the support group Mother to Mother. She has been at the side of mothers and families who have lost their loved ones to gun violence. Jeani is instrumental in creating a safe place for herself and fellow grieving mothers on the journey of grieving and healing, as well as processing their collective hurt and sadness. Outside of working mothers, teenagers, and young adults, Jeani is very active in supporting individuals that are in desperate need of housing, safety, food, and other necessities to sustain quality of life. Jeani is vocal in the community and a respected leader who promotes change, unity, and peace for everyone. Gerlach has been serving on City Council since January 2020. She previously served on the Allentown School District School Board for 8 years. She is a Center City Allentown resident and first-time homeowner. Cece currently works as a street outreach worker for the homeless youth at Valley Youth House. She has worked as a therapist and teacher. Cece is a community activist who continues to fight for community benefits agreement in Allentown and is connected to downtown development and affordable housing. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you. I guess it starts with me, right?
It's with you, Jeani.
All right. So I first want to say thank you for having me and having this conversation. It's imperative. I want to start off with a place to live is a basic human need. I would like to start off with homelessness. So I visit two tent cities, two tent camps, one here in Allentown and one in Bethlehem. I have assisted several people with pitching tents and getting them established the best way they can in this horrific situation of being homeless. I've watched several of them deteriorate mentally because of their situation and get stuck in this situation because of lack of affordable housing. And homelessness didn't start with them in one day. It was a series of things that happened in their life that could have happened to any of us, whether it be job loss, eviction, or mental health. So it's very important for us to get to know the homeless community and find ways and resources to get them out of this. Homelessness is not supposed to happen here. And the fact that it does and that it becomes long-term for many residents at Tent City is very discouraging. It's sad watching them. I have homeless people that never experienced drug use and are now drug addicts from being in the environment that they live in. I've also had children down there at the homeless camps that are exposed to things that are very the norm for the homeless community, which is sex, drugs, alcoholism. They're stuck. They need help. I am on this journey to help them get out of there. I have a family in Bethlehem who has built by hand their own little compound fenced in, who have been there for 16 years. Okay. And they become complacent because they know that they cannot afford to live in an apartment, like the rest of us. Whether it's lack of resources, job placement, mental health. A lot of them have physical needs. They have health issues, and it's just their mental health is deteriorating day by day, quicker than the physical health. The mental health is deteriorating, and getting used to living in a cabin in the woods with no heat, no water, no electricity, it's going to tear you down. And that's a huge issue that we're having here in Allentown. And because it's behind woods and over a trestle and a broken bridge, we don't see it. We don't get to see it. So it's swept under the carpet. I know there are a lot of organizations that volunteer and work out ways to help the homeless, but it's something that the city in itself has to address and put on the forefront of how we can get these families the help that they need to get out of these homeless camps. I'd also like to talk about reentry. So there are a lot of people that are sitting in prison right now for nonviolent crimes or even violent crimes that cannot get out of prison. They've paid their dues, they did their time, and they can't come home because they don't have an address. A simple address keeps them in prison longer than they were sentenced to be in. That's huge. That's huge. And then when they do come home, if they use a family's address or a friend's address to get them home, to get them out of the prison, then they face obstacles of finding employment in order to sustain affordable housing, which then wears on them mentally the fear and risk of going back to prison. Then comes the issues of how can I earn the money to pay for where I live? What can I do? Do I resort back to the things I used to do that got me in prison? So that's very huge. We don't have a lot of opportunity for people coming home from prison to get them into affordable housing. That's really huge. And that's a green sheet. That's what that's called. They wait for their green sheet and then they need an address. They submit an address in order to come home. So that's something that the city also needs to really work on. I don't know of many halfway houses in Allentown. The only one I knew of was demolished due to the NIS and the rebuilding of downtown, and was relocated into Berks County. And then there's a few Oxford houses. Outside of family providing an address, those are basically your options. And that's scary. I also like to talk about something that's really I'm passionate about, and that's with the COVID. I've noticed that the shelters are full, and there's nobody's coming in and nobody's coming out. Also, the fact that families, there's no shelters for families to keep families together. That's pretty huge. So basically, we're separating dad from the family to provide for the women and the children. That's huge. The men that I've spoke to, the fathers that I've spoke to, it takes a lot for them to deal with. It's a mental health crisis that they cannot provide for their family to begin with. And then to have to separate and leave their families at night at the shelter and go sleep in their car or go sleep in a tent because they can't get they can't have the resources together as a family. That's huge for me. And I believe there's only one agency here that allows that. Maybe two, I'm sorry. 6th Street Shelter and Family Promise. But other than that, you don't get to stay together. So I feel like the system is already designed to separate Black and brown families from their fathers. And now with this affordable housing or lack of, it's just a domino effect. It's continuing to tear families apart. So that's really huge. The other issue is HUD. So it's a housing list. I personally, single mom with 5 kids, waited on the housing list for 5 years. By the time they called me, I didn't need those services anymore. I think it's a backwards system. It's a handout system. We have people that are on the housing department living on housing for way too long. It doesn't allow other families to come in and get the services they need to get back on their feet. Right now, the housing list is again frozen. I have families in hotels. I have families in shelters that are so far on the list. By the time they get called, I hope they don't need the services, but some of them do. And so they stay complacent in the same situation they were in, 5 years later. So that's another issue. I mean, how long do you wait on a list for food? How long do you wait on the list for health care or for medical assistance? The housing department needs to flow just like those other organizations. The HUD freeze is, like I said, it's keeping families complacent. A lot of families, they benefit from it, and some don't. They are stuck in the system, and they're okay with making a minimal amount of money from employment because they know their rent will be low. So the system is definitely being taken advantage of, as well as not moving fast enough to help the people that need the help. And that's huge. So that's a big problem. Also want to talk about the new apartments and condos up and down Hamilton Street. We have several new buildings that have not set aside any apartments for low income or affordable housing or the middle class or the working family. We can't afford to live there. And that's huge. I can't afford to live there in the strata or any of the new condos that are being built. What are we going to do with that? Like, how are we going to get affordable housing into Allentown? Where is there a list that says, okay, these apartments are affordable, they're in this range? It's hard to find anything. I've searched all over for the last probably 4 months with the COVID, trying to find apartments, affordable housing for people, and it's empty. You can't find anything. And I know a lot of that has to do with the moratorium for eviction. And then that's another problem. We're going to have an influx of homeless people after August 31st. Where are we going to find affordable housing here in Allentown? Affordable housing should not mean you have to live in an unsafe apartment, a rundown apartment that's maintained by a landlord who isn't up following the code to keep his apartment building going. And we have a lot of that in Allentown. So I'm nervous for August 31st to hit. I'm nervous to see what's going to happen. I don't think Allentown is ready. They weren't ready for the pandemic, shelter-wise, and I don't think they're going to be ready for the evictions that are going to come after this moratorium is lifted. So it is a great concern for all of us. The mental health, just imagine losing your home, especially with children, losing your job. COVID is a big example of a lot of people who lost their jobs. Some people got pandemic money, some people didn't. Some people are still waiting for employment. How are we supposed to pay our bills when they're already high? How are we supposed to pay our rent when it's already at least 70% of our income? So that's the issues that I'm seeing here in Allentown with affordable housing. I know it's a lot, and I said a lot. So I know there's going to be, hopefully there's a lot of Q&A of what we can do and how we can help. And I'm pretty well good there. I'll pass it along to Cece.
Thank you so much, Jeannie. Thanks for all that information. One more quick question. Do you know what the rate of homelessness is in Allentown? What the percentage is or what the numbers are?
I don't. I'm hoping Cece does.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Should I just go or?
Yep.
Okay, all right, cool. So I guess before, I do have a little PowerPoint to share in a little bit, but just to kind of pick it off where Jeannie just left off. Unfortunately, the way that we measure homelessness is using federal guidelines, which are lousy. In order to be qualified as homeless, you've literally got to be like out there, unsheltered, in a tent. So people who are doubling and tripling up in a room, they don't federally count as homeless. Now, most of the agencies though that work in Lehigh County, they don't necessarily, I mean, for some grants, like if they're federal grants, then yeah, they've got to use that definition. But for others like Ripple, they rely solely on private funding. And so they're able to actually serve people who are homeless in a multitude of ways. The last RAB meeting, which is the Regional Homeless Advisory Board that I attended, the numbers were something of, this is like back in December of 2019. The numbers were somewhere around like 3,000 people had called in to the coordinated entry system, which is the 211, and expressed a need for housing. And of those like 3,000 some odd people, it was, it was like 1/3, around 1,000 or so were actually able to be housed. And I know those are really rough numbers, and those has probably changed, especially with COVID, but that's all I could remember. That's part of the problem. We as a city haven't really kept track of homelessness. That hopefully should change now that we have this homeless commission. The first meeting should be in September. I have to check on that first date, where that's one of the tasks that we'll have to start working on, is to actually have a database to be tracking this, because honestly, no one can really tell you at this point. RAB, they measure things at a regional level, but no one in Allentown is tasked with really keeping track of this. But all right, so I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, share computer sound. I'm gonna click on this. Okay, share. Oh, cool. All right. Okay, so affordable housing. So before I get into everything, for me, affordable housing, yes, it's a PowerPoint and it's going to be a bunch of statistics and policies and all the stuff that gets my juices flowing. I don't know if it gets your juices flowing, but this is also very personal for me. So I grew up in public housing. If it wasn't for public housing, my mom and I would have been homeless. I don't know how much she paid in rent, but it couldn't have been that much. She told me she was on welfare. She got, I think, like $700 between welfare and Social Security for her disability. So the rent had to have been less than $700. And then later in life, after I graduated from college, I did experience homelessness for I don't know how many months, from Thanksgiving of 2009 to around Good Friday of 2000, or sorry, Thanksgiving of 2008 until Good Friday, around Good Friday of 2009. So for me, this is very personal, but I'll keep emotion out today and I will just keep it factual. Okay, so I just kind of started off with some numbers. And the reason why I've got the United States Federal Poverty Guidelines up there is really to show how poor you've got to be to qualify for assistance. I don't qualify for assistance. Most people I know who are working, even just like a job at McDonald's full time, don't qualify based on these guidelines. I'll skip down to the bottom where it says, talking about Allentown. So 1 in 3 people do meet these guidelines, which is even more depressing, that 1 in 3 people, that's how much money they got. One person earns $12,760 or less at 1 year. And then a family of 3, less than $21,720. So 1 in 3 people in Allentown actually meet those guidelines. And then 1 in 4 people are like most of the people who are on this Zoom webinar today. We're working poor, where we make too much to qualify to get any kind of federal help or county help, but we don't make enough just to make ends meet. Where we saw this during the pandemic, where, you know, people can't go into work because of this virus, and next thing you know, people can't pay bills because we don't have the ability to actually accumulate savings. I don't have a savings account. I have no need for one. I have no money to save. The area median income is $38,522. The reason why that's important is because it's the median income, which means 50% of the people are earning less than that, and there obviously are some people earning more than that. And to Jeannie's point about the neighborhood improvement zone, all those tall, fancy buildings downtown, and the, you know, nice restaurants that people like to go to that I can't afford and most of my neighbors can't afford. 57% poverty rate around all that. So we build it up. It looks nice. When you drive into Allentown, you can say, oh, look at this beautiful city. It looks good on postcards. And when you're trying to sell Allentown to outside investors, but 57%, almost 60%. And that's back, that data is from back in 2018. I would venture to say it's increased since then. 57% of people that live around all those fancy buildings are living in poverty. And again, poverty according to the federal poverty guidelines. So it's important to know that even people who are not homeless, many people are housing insecure, which means they're just one emergency away, one paycheck, from one flat tire from being homeless. Housing should not consist, according to HUD, should not consist of more than 30% of your income. For most people it does, and I have some stats about that. In America, there's 20 million renters who spend more than half of their monthly income on rent. In 2017, it was determined that Allentown, good old Allentown, had the highest rent to income ratio in the entire United States. And what that means is that out of all the states and all the cities, that Allentown, people in Allentown were paying the most out of their monthly income going towards rent. According to the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission, in the report that they produced, from 2018 to 2019, in the Lehigh Valley itself, there's been an 8% rent increase. The average rent is $1,173. And in many cases, it's cheaper just to buy a home. You can see the other rent increases. 2.7 million people in the United States in 2017 faced eviction. And in Pennsylvania alone, 70% of extremely low income renters who are people who are making less than federal poverty guidelines, they are severely house burdened, which means I've had clients in my previous jobs where literally they get like $800 a month from Social Security and their rent is like $700, $750. So how do you eat? How do you have a cell phone? How do you, ride the bus? Like, how do you survive when you have $100 to $50 left after you pay rent? So I'm not even going to spend too much time on this. This is just federal funding. It's important to know, but it's so much kind of like out of our control that I don't want to focus on it too much. Where we really have control as a people is what we do locally and the policies that we enact locally. Federal stuff, we're not going to be able to tell Trump or Obama or Biden or whoever, we're not going to be able to, tell them, hey, look, we want you to do that. No, that's a federal level. We'll leave that to the Congress people and the senators, and have to advocate to them to increase this funding in these different areas. But we have more control over what's happening locally. And sometimes what we can do locally is make up for the lack of funding in these federal areas, especially depending on who the administration is at the time. So before I get into the local stuff, Jeannie had touched on this, gentrification. This is just a little image I found about what gentrification is. If you think about Hamilton Street, that's gentrification, where you have a group of people who are celebrating it and they're calling it revitalization and renewal. And really all it is displacing poor people, poor white people and brown and black people. It completely disrupts neighborhoods, because in neighborhoods where we've lived for generations after generations, and ice cream trucks come and you bust open the fire hose and you have a nice time in the summer. When you have new groups of people who maybe aren't accustomed to that, they move in. They don't like that. So next thing you know, you've got them calling the cops on the ice cream truck because it's making too much noise at 9 p.m. And then now you don't have the ice cream truck. So it's little things like that where it really starts to change the dynamics of a neighborhood. Small businesses start to close, and most of the small businesses that start to close are brown and black owned businesses that have been there for generations. So these are some local policies that I'll be getting into that really can help to increase the affordable housing. I think, again, it's important that we focus on local because to some degree, we can't control, other than voting and advocating to our kind of elected officials at a national level. We can't control that, but we can control what's happening in our municipalities, and we can advocate for these policies and more locally. City councils can do this, mayors can do these things to kind of fill in the gap for federal government screwing up. Okay, so let me see if this video works. I clicked that you should be able to hear the sound, but we'll see. So this is I think it's like a 2-minute video on inclusionary zoning. It explains it way better than I could, so let me do that.
Cities are rebounding all across the country after struggling for decades to attract new investment. Yet in nearly every corner of America, communities are concerned with what seems to be a growing crisis: How do we make sure that people of all incomes share in the benefits of development and growth? Millions of people worked hard to make our cities better, and we invested billions of tax dollars to improve struggling neighborhoods. It worked. But one result is housing prices are rising rapidly. Many people who work so hard to make our cities places we want to live can no longer afford to live in them. This pattern is not going to change on its own. So more and more communities are consciously promoting mixed income development through inclusionary housing programs. These inclusionary policies require builders of market rate housing to include some units the local workforce can own or rent. Here's how it works. Imagine a developer is building a 100-unit apartment building. A local inclusionary housing ordinance requires 15 of the new apartments to be rented to lower or middle income residents. 15 homes won't solve the housing crisis, but over time, as whole neighborhoods redevelop, inclusionary policies create more economically integrated neighborhoods. Providing affordable housing in market rate buildings might reduce a building's profitability, but research shows modest inclusionary requirements don't result in higher rents or less development. Inclusionary housing is rapidly becoming a common part of the housing landscape. Over 500 communities have adopted local policies. It's working in big cities, small cities, and suburban communities across the country. It works best in places with healthy housing markets, development, and rising costs. Inclusionary housing won't meet all our affordable housing needs. It's not likely to ever eliminate the demand for federal affordable housing subsidies. But as affordable housing becomes more and more critical, adopting an inclusionary housing policy is one thing local communities can do to make a real difference.
All right, cool. And so that gets to Jeannie's point. She brought up inclusionary zoning, requiring that as we continue to build these places for the wealthy, that we have requirements for affordable, and not necessarily, like people who are making $12,000, but, maybe those folks who are working poor who don't qualify for some of the federal programs. See here. So community benefits ordinance. Some people may be more familiar with community benefits agreements, which are cool, but not as legally powerful. These ordinances essentially say that as you build these, beautiful skyscrapers and as you revitalize a community, that you've got to require that city will require tangible benefits, not just saying, hey, look, we're going to bring jobs to you. Yay, we're good. No, like tangible stuff. Okay, what kind of jobs? And do the people who are in the surrounding neighborhood and in the city itself have the job skills to get those jobs? And if not, well then, okay, you're going to have to set up job training programs to ensure that those folks will have the skills by the time you actually open business. And I mean, others in Detroit, they've done some amazing things through their ordinance. I spoke with the guy that manages it out there, and I mean, they've built everything from basketball courts to jobs for the people in the Pistons, their practice stadium. They prioritize giving local residents the jobs in that Pistons practice arena. But I mean, it really is customized to the neighborhood, what the neighborhood wants. Some neighborhoods might want grocery stores and green space. Other neighborhoods might want to focus on affordable housing. And it requires community participation, which is another thing where, right now, pretty much the people that have the power are people that have the power and in elected offices and things, but the residents themselves, they don't have any power. They don't really have a voice. So passing this changes that. We passed a resolution in July sometime, I forget when, in July sometime, where it is just a resolution, but yeah, it does have some teeth, because it says to the current consultants who are looking at our zoning ordinances, and developing a housing plan, it mandates to them, you've got to look at these two things, and you've got to figure out a way to incorporate them into the zoning code and into our housing plan. So that's progress. It's not an ordinance, but it hopefully will lead to one. Oh crap. I just start that again? Okay, let's see, how do I get to this next? Why is it doing that? Okay, I'll just click this. Okay, so rent stabilization dash rent control, it's what it sounds like. It regulates rent increases. Some people say we can't do this as a third-class city in Pennsylvania. Other people have told me that we can. I haven't done anything with this yet. No one has, but it's something to consider because rents are going up, wages are not going up, so we've got to do something to stabilize the rent levels, at least in certain neighborhoods. The relocation ordinance. So what this would say is, you know, there's a lot of people, and I'm sure Jeannie can attest to this, where, you know, they become homeless just because they have a crappy landlord who doesn't keep up the property, and then the city comes along and deems it blighted and deems it unlivable, and then now they got to get out. And a lot of people don't have leases, like actual like signed leases, and even if they do, they may not have, you know, knowledge of the system and where to go for help to actually like make their landlord fulfill their lease. So they just got to go, and then next thing you know, they're homeless, or they're living with someone else, and then that person kicks them out, and it creates this cycle. So what this relocation ordinance would do is it would say, if you are a crappy landlord and you get cited by the city and you can't have people living in your building anymore, you've got to cover those relocation costs for those tenants. So I think that would help, at least for people in that situation. Just touching on land banks and land trusts, people use these terms interchangeably, but they're two different things, similar but two different things. So a land bank, that's basically where a government entity like city council, well, the city, not city council, but the city would, or a nonprofit, takes vacant or blighted properties and turns them into actual like housing. The goal is to make it affordable housing. And there's a sense of, you know, as you can see here, this shared equity and commitment to keeping those homes that are acquired affordable. And that's another way, you know, with gentrification, to stop everything from going up all the time. And you know, it's good to have a kind of a multitude of I guess attacks, because some things might not pass, some things might not even work, but if you're going at different angles, then one of these things is going to work, or maybe the combo of everything will work. Land trust, how long is this video? What time is it? Okay, so land trust, I think this is like a 2-minute video too, better than I could explain it, so let me just quick play this.
Community land trusts, or CLTs, are nonprofit organizations that acquire, own, and steward land permanently for the common good. The most common CLT land use is housing, but retail, office, and a variety of other uses are possible. CLTs give formal decision-making voice and power to local community residents in determining land uses. Here's how CLTs make home buying affordable for families in their communities. First, the CLT builds or buys homes using one-time public or private investment. Next, the CLT sells just the home to a low-income buyer who qualifies for a mortgage, and the CLT keeps the land, holding it in trust for future generations of home buyers. In return for being able to buy a home at a discounted price, the family agrees to pay it forward and sell to another low-income family at a price they can afford. The CLT manages the sales process, ensuring that each home-buying family builds some wealth from a predetermined, limited amount of the sales proceeds. In this way, the one-time public or private investment in CLT homes makes lasting affordability a reality and stabilizes communities. And CLTs benefit the larger community too, as they preserve and protect housing for long-term residents, helping to build stronger, safer, and higher quality diverse neighborhoods, contributing to greater educational attainment, employment opportunities, and health outcomes. Visit groundedsolutions.org to learn more about CLTs today.
Oh, okay, I guess that's the last one. All right, my bad. So I'm glad at the end, it said visit Grounded Solutions, because honestly, I think what's important is, none of this is like anyone's own idea. This has all been done by other cities, and it's just a matter of finding these different policies. And there's more out there that we don't know about. Grounded Solutions has been a great resource. In order to have them do consulting, they want an arm and a leg, but luckily on their website, they've put everything there. So you just kind of have to go through it. So let me see. Yeah, so that's all I've got. That's my contact information. And yeah, so I'm done. Thank you.
Ola, are you there? Did Ola disappear? No, Ola, are you there?
Yes, no, I'm here.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, so I don't see any questions yet. Yeah, I don't see any questions yet. Cece or Jeannie, do you have any like specific things that you wanted to present to the participants to see, like, maybe if they might have some specific thoughts about something that was said or something in regards to the pre-work or anything that any way you want to guide the discussion?
I see a question there.
Okay, in the chat. All right, perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so this is a question from Mark. So have any Lehigh Valley communities adopted inclusive housing ordinances, inclusive zoning?
No, unfortunately, they have not. The Lehigh Valley Planning Commission, they've studied this since 2015. They have a whole plan. They have a whole kind of statement on it. But no one in the Lehigh Valley has. In Pennsylvania, there's an inclusionary zoning out in Pittsburgh. It's new. 2019, they passed it. They have it down in State College. They have it in Lancaster County. They have a very weak one in Philly, but what's her name? She just got on there. Kendra Brooks. She's a new city council person there. She's trying to work with that. Bethlehem has a very weak one too. It's not voluntary. Like it's almost like saying, hey, you can give me $5 or not give me $5. Like you're not going to give it. So Bethlehem is a very weak one. Hopefully their city council members will be able to step up and make it stronger. If it's not mandatory, it doesn't work. And I visited State College, and they're awesome. I mean, I know it's a whole different dynamic there because it's like a college town, but talking with their community economic development and planning department there, like they've been able to combine federal funds with state funds, with private funds, with inclusionary zoning, and actually have like a piggy bank of money that they can use to build affordable homes. Because most developers don't want to include them, which sucks. But when they don't include them, they have to give out like millions to the I shouldn't say millions, hundreds of thousands to the municipalities, and then the municipalities can use that money to build affordable homes or shelters or whatever it is. And they got a really good handle on it there. So when we pass this, I hope that State College will be willing to kind of be like a partner with us and kind of help us get this going. It's going to pass eventually.
Can I ask a question? What is the quality of the housing, of the affordable housing that is being built in some of these places? I mean, because I would think most people don't want to build it because they can't get the money that they could normally get for a more expensive apartment, correct? That's why developers don't want to do it.
Yeah, so yeah, it's quality. It's real nice. So it's, I mean, in State College at least, that's the only one I've actually went to go see. It's beautiful. I'm talking like, if you think strata times 20, like fire pits, pools, gym. They had like a yoga room. Who has a yoga room? It was beyond anything I could ever think people could actually live in, like anyone, even rich people. Like, I didn't think the amenities were beyond anything. And this one I viewed, think the homes were mixed in, the apartments were mixed in, the working class folks. So from the outside, you really don't know who is what. And inside, they have some of the same amenities, but just to kind of scale down the cost, they may not have everything. Like, they may not have granite countertops, but no one knows that unless you go inside the house. But they had access to everything. They were out at the fire pit doing their s'mores just like everyone else. Yeah, I mean, it's quality stuff. And then there was another site that they built off location. Those were nice too. So it has to be quality. It has to be just as good as what they would do for market rate.
Nice. Jeannie, did you have any feedback about affordable housing units or?
She said it all. That's exactly what I was going to say. Yep.
I
Perfect.
have one more question. I think Overlook Park, I have heard is an example of mixed income housing. Is that correct?
It is. I know several families who live over there, and it's definitely mixed. Some of them are homeowners, and some of them are renters, and they are paying the 30% of their income. Overlook is very nice. It's a little hard to get into, but it is nice.
Yeah, I wondered how that was working out, how people were getting along, and just how people overall were satisfied with their situation there, because that's something nearby.
It's a very diverse community over there, and I like the mixture of some home ownership and some renters. I do like that. It keeps everybody together. It's nice over there, but it's like I said, it's very hard to get over there. The waiting list is, I don't even think it's open right now to the public, if I'm not mistaken. It's also frozen. So you can't get in if you're going in as a renter looking for affordable housing.
If anybody wants to make a comment, I think they can hit under reaction. They can raise their hand or something, or just unmute.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. There's a couple more questions now in the chat that I'd like to present. So looks like Mariska Van Aus, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, said, how long ago did State College implement these programs?
So they started it in 2011, but that ordinance sucked. It wasn't strong enough, and it was just, they were doing it out of community pressure, but it wasn't a strong ordinance. So then they had to go back, I think 2013 or 14, they had to go back and revise it and make it an actual like strong ordinance that would fit their community. So yeah, so since 2011, but effectively since like 2013, 14.
Thank you. Mark put another question. Are folks organizing around this in Bethlehem or Easton?
Do you know anything, Jeannie? I don't know about.
That I'm not sure of.
Yeah, I mean, I know Grace Cramsey and I have talked about it. She's on Bethlehem City Council. And I know she's had like offline meetings. Easton, I have no idea. I don't even know who's on City Council in Easton. That's my fault. Damn, I should know. Sorry.
Thanks.
Can I say something?
Yes.
It's Mark. So the reason I asked the question is because I wonder if it would help you gain momentum in any particular city if there was a movement across the valley that would, raise up the issue and make it more known and more talked about and more promoted.
Yeah, I was wondering if the impact of the transient student population in State College intersected with this in some way, and that Easton might be a similar kind of, like, they might have similar dynamics around their like housing, you know, stock and all that stuff. So it might be a little easier to kind of map it onto Easton. And I'm actually really encouraged by the fact that it hasn't been implemented that long, and you've already seen like such dramatic outcomes there. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion to read. I'm Bethlehem, I know some folks, but Easton, yeah, if we all, and I think it would have to be a thing where we all are galvanized together and we're encouraging other cities to do it too. I don't know if it would work just council to council. I think it would have to be a community effort. So.
And Bethlehem too, obviously. Like, I wasn't thinking, but they have Lehigh and Moravian, and yeah, so they have that too.
Yeah, I want to encourage people to ask about and discuss too, kind of, I know Jeannie touched on this a lot, but the impact on the social determinants of health. I think we certainly notice that there are a lot of links with housing and health, but you know, if anyone has any questions or any comments to make about how they are seeing this connection, or ways that you want to you know, continue the discussion about the connection for those who do not have access to affordable housing, and how that impacts health and life outcomes.
I just want to say, Jeannie, I know you've talked about how it affects kids and going to school and their education and their, you know, it's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, so we're losing, Rooster retired, and he was the guy in charge, like with the kids and the homelessness. His position is going to be a tough one to fill, because there's a lot of homeless kids in Allentown, more recent than ever, I think. I've had homeless teens and youth reach out to me looking for places to stay, and trying to get into the Valley Youth House and other organizations to seek shelter. And most definitely, like, you can't go to school hungry and homeless, you know, and expect to be your very best, top of the morning and ready to learn and get an education when you're worried about where you're going to sleep, you know, that night. So that's huge. We definitely got to rally around this homelessness, you know, community-wise, to get these policies in place, because these kids, I mean, there's kids down at Tent City right now, you know, and it's a scary thing when you go down there and you see young adults and teenagers down there living and calling that a home. You know, they're exposed to so many different things that they otherwise wouldn't be, you know, and it's eviction. Sometimes mom has several kids and she's like, okay, well, you got to go stay with, you know, this brother, you got to go stay with this family member, that family member, and the family is split up. And then out of desperation, you know, other things come into mind, and then, you know, where Allentown is infected with homelessness and lack of resources. You know, I have a mom right now that was just placed in a hotel for a week, all through private donations. She was literally sleeping in the car with her 4 children under the age of 3. She was evicted because she was staying with family members, and, you know, they told her to leave. So she doesn't know her rights as a tenant. If you're there for 30 days, over 30 days, and you're accepting mail there, then you have to go through the eviction process. You know, but when it's family, I mean, that could take place, but the mental health of living somewhere, staying somewhere where you're not wanted, you know, is also, you know, it's mental health. It takes a toll on your mental health. So she packed up her kids and got in a van, and that's her shelter. And there's not a lot of resources that I can offer to her right now, and she's coming, you know, to me in crisis. what do I do in the weekends? And you know, she has to leave the hotel with her 4 children. Who do I turn to ask for help when, you know, the resources are limited? There's no movement going on in the city right now as far as shelter and affordable housing is what I'm saying. And we got to do better. I mean, I think we're getting a second wave of the coronavirus, or another pandemic may come about, and all of these things existed. But I think with COVID, it just exposed so many gaps in the shelter system, in the housing system, in the affordable care, housing system. It exposed so many gaps.
Thank you so much, Jeannie. I remember you also during your presentation about wanting to have dialogue during this time about solutions, right? And about like what are some things that folks can do. And CCU also, I think, could chime in and kind of talk to the folks that are on the call about some things that the community should be organizing around. I see a question that just came in from Daniel. Jessica Ortiz talked to my group about the need for mediation in the courts for tenants and landlords to educate people on their rights. Is implementing this mediation possible in Allentown?
I believe North Penn Legal will give you a free consultation, and I'm not sure if they'll represent you or mediate in court for you, but that is a huge issue, and I'm glad you brought up that question, because a lot of people don't understand their landlord-tenant rights. They really don't know. They go to social media looking for answers, Q&A, from people that may have experienced this already, and that's huge. Landlord-tenant rights need to be more available. We should be able to see it. That handbook should be given to every tenant who signs a lease, whether they're in housing. In housing and HUD, you get a rule book. I think landlords should have to give that up. And like Cece said, a lot of times you live there for the first year, maybe you have a signed contract, a lease, and then moving forward, it's just kind of a verbal agreement, and you never re-sign that lease. Or sometimes landlords just take the money and give you a little written receipt on a piece of paper, and you don't understand your rights, and then they come and they evict you. That's huge, knowing your rights as a tenant.
Perfect. There's another question here from Mariska. Are there any estimates about how many people may get evicted when evictions resume?
Oof. Mariska, I don't have an estimate, but I'm going to tell you it's going to be huge. It's going to be huge because, unfortunately, a lot of people, for one reason or another, think that moratorium means you're free from paying rent. And in reality they don't realize that it's accumulating. And then when the moratorium gets lifted, you're going to have all of that rent in hand to cover those months. And with the pandemic funds and people receiving that money, I've been encouraging people, take that money and pay your bills, because, the best that you can, because you're going to have to pay all that stuff back, as well as the Utilities Commission. Right now, there's a moratorium that utilities can't be shut off. Well, I'll tell you what, when that gets lifted, we're not only going to deal with people being evicted, we're going to be dealing with people with no water, and with no electric. It's going to get hectic. It's going to get really bad.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like we're ready. As a community, we're not ready to deal with that. We're not prepared.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember when the city had, I forget how much was it, like $2,000 or something like that they were offering to people. That list filled up, not even within a day, like within hours, the money was gone. So I mean, if that's what happened within hours in Allentown for $2,000, I would say, I don't know, estimate maybe like at least thousands, I would say, at least in the city.
Thousands.
Yeah, because and then rents are going up. And I mean, and we've had landlords, some of them have been public, who, you know, were less than understanding of people's scenarios and individual cases. There's some good landlords I know who have frozen rents and didn't even collect them over the last couple months. But then there's some less than kind individuals who were pretty public and how they wanted their money, pay up or get out.
I know
Yeah,
there's.
so,
Go ahead.
so I have a landlord down on 7th and Linden. He owns the building there right above the laundromat. I call him weekly to get updates on vacancies so I can get families affordable housing, because his apartments are fairly, they're okay, they're sustainable. And he said, his words, call me on September 1st and I will give you all my vacancies. The building will be empty. So that's scary. That's about 40 apartments, studio apartments and rooms in that building. And he said it will be empty. So,
Wow.
yeah, that's huge. And that's one of the issues now because of the moratorium in place. There's no vacancies. So apartments that may be affordable or just, you know, they're just making it. People are staying in it because of the moratorium, and they're I hate to say taking advantage of that, but it is what it is, and they're not moving. So there's no turnaround. There's no turnaround within the community, and it's going to be bad.
Well, we just want to hold a little bit more space for folks to chime in, whether it's you can, at this point, I think we have an intimate enough group where you guys can unmute yourself if you have a question, or just put it in the chat.
Question. Have the hospitals networks taken any role in housing, recognizing the health determinant impacts of not having housing?
Not to my knowledge, Mark. I do work with Lehigh Valley Health Network frequently for donations for like furniture and clothing and things like that. But as far as the affordable housing issues and mental health that goes along with it, not to my knowledge. I'm actually helping them with resources for some of their people that, you know, they help the social workers at Lehigh Valley Health Network reach out to me in need of resources as well. Because there's a lack of resources for everything right now. It seems like there's just not enough to go around. And if we're like this now, you know, in a few months, it's going to be, we're going to be in jeopardy, serious jeopardy.
And the, you know, bringing up hospitals, yeah, I mean, in other cities I've seen where hospitals, because housing is a determinant, they've literally found that it was, am I unmuted? Yeah. They've literally found that it was cheaper to like provide housing for people than to continue to treat folks who are experiencing homelessness for like things that like only a homeless person outside or sleeping in a car would be experiencing, because I mean healthcare is expensive. And then they were talking, I was at a conference, PA Alliance for Housing, I think, in Harrisburg, and they were talking about, I was at a session, they were talking about even for people who are not experiencing homelessness, but they're living in dilapidated housing, it's also cheaper to make sure that they have quality housing, because then you don't have like asthma rates, and you don't have, people breathing in mold and asbestos. And so it actually makes it cheaper to provide healthcare for the hospitals if they address housing. And then obviously the school districts benefit as well, because if you've got kids eating lead and having to take off time from school because they're having asthma attacks, and mom, rightfully so, is not paying the rent because the landlord isn't fixing the roof that's leaking disgusting water into her kid's room, and they're jumping around from place to place, like it all works together. So yeah, I mean, for me, yeah, housing is fundamental, and until we fix that, we're going to continue to have the performance that we've had in the school system. We're going to continue to have the incarceration rates. We're going to continue to everything that we see that we don't like, we're going to continue to have, because the fundamental, if you don't have a place to lay your head at night, you don't know where you're going to lay your head at night, then you're in survival mode, and your mind is not thinking about voting. Your mind is not thinking about going to a city council meeting. Your mind is not thinking about that. It's thinking about, where do I sleep tonight? So to me, that's the most fundamental thing.
Piggybacking off what you just said, Cece, I have a gentleman who has back problems, who lives in Tent City, and every year come October, what he does is he commits small petty crimes so that he could get a sentence and be incarcerated to get him through the winter months, because he knows that he'll be released. Then, come springtime, it's time for him to go. He'll get like a 6 months, even 90 days will keep him warm and fed. And he does this every year. He's very well known in Allentown. He said, I'd rather sleep on a metal bed than on the ground because of his back issues. And then also to get his medicine. He doesn't have issues getting his medicine while being incarcerated. So this is bad. It's huge when you actually have to think, well, okay, it's October now. Let me go steal, a sandwich out of the corner store, or, something small like that, or disorderly conduct, so I have a place to stay through the winter because of my health care.
Yep. Has anybody talked about a tiny house community in this area?
Yeah, we've definitely talked about it. The Ortiz Arc Foundation and myself, we've talked about it. We're at the very beginning of stages of where do we even begin? I don't know, Cece, do you have anything on that? Like, is that something we could do in Allentown? Where would we do it? How do we get the land? Those are all questions that, yeah, we need.
No, yeah, 100% is doable. I was attending Pastor Bob at Zion's church, the Liberty Bell Church on Hamilton Street. And for about like 6 months, there was a subcommittee specifically talking about tiny homes, following the Austin model, because I guess the one guy, Sean, he works with street medicine. He had went down and he had like saw it and fell in love with it. So I mean, it's more than doable here. That committee chose to move in a different direction. I'm not saying that was the wrong direction to go in, but they just collectively chose to go in a different direction. But tiny homes is more than a possibility. They were looking at a couple spots, but one of the pieces of land they were looking at is when you're on, you're on Hanover Avenue and you're going into Bethlehem. On the right-hand side, there's that huge lot. There's like a retirement village in the back. And I think some strip club or something used to be at that corner right there. That land they were looking at, because it's in between Allentown and Bethlehem. It's a huge piece of land. And yeah, I mean, one of the things that the Homeless Commission, so we've 3 kind of areas, is one is year-round shelter, another is housing, like permanent or transitional housing, and another is not necessarily a tent encampment, but something, either tent encampment dash tiny home, something for someone who maybe can't or won't live in a traditional kind of environment because of mental health stuff or whatever's going on. So that, yeah, it's not off the table, but it would require zoning changes, because right now there's not really a spot zoned like that in Allentown.
Yeah, there are a lot of people in the homeless community that will not go into traditional housing. And I think that is mental health, because who would not want to come home, open your door, your key, open your door and come home and have a roof over your head and a place to sleep? So it's definitely a mental health issue. And I'm sure they didn't think like that prior to becoming homeless. I think it's a coping mechanism, a way to cope in your situation. And then again, you just get complacent with, the way things are. You don't think things will change and things will get better. So you're just, you know what, I'm a survivor. I'm gonna figure this out, and I'm gonna be okay. And that's challenging to reprogram your mind just to get by. And it's very unfortunate that you have to do so.
Do you think part of that is also that some of the shelters are, they don't permit like drug use, or if they have like zero tolerance policies? So if people get kicked out, then instead of like working with people while they're in recovery and maybe having slip ups or something like that, is that a part of it?
Yeah, I think so. I think if the shelters incorporated assistance through recovery or recovery programs, I think it would, you get people in and you get them out. I don't know the percentage how that would work, but it's not I don't think the shelters are providing nothing more than shelter for the evening. I think that's it. Here's your shelter, and there's nothing else. There's nothing else to go along with it. And I wish we could add more to that, so that they could get some recovery help. And, there's not a lot of that out here either, especially if you fall in between a certain income guideline where you can get help for recovery. So I think the shelters and the drug program would work really well together.
Thank you all so much for all of your questions and the discussion. And thank you, Jeani and Cece, for presenting. I'm just going to launch the poll right now. People can still continue to ask questions as they come to your mind. And Jeani and Cece, if you have any thoughts that you find that you want to share, that's fine. I'm just going to
I just want to thank you both. That was so informative and compelling on a number of different levels. I really thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. I didn't have my PowerPoint and everything set up like Cece, but I hope
I was up
that
to 2 a.m. and if you wouldn't have called me, I wouldn't have remembered. So thank you.
No, I told her not to do a PowerPoint because she was gonna make me look bad, and she said it won't be a huge PowerPoint, so it's okay. But I'm glad that we're talking about this because I'm scared that Allentown is you're going to start seeing, we're already seeing a lot of people, like, it's starting to grow over the number of years with people holding signs at every intersection, right? We're already starting to see that grow. There was a time when I would feel comfortable, like, driving down 7th and Linden or walking down 7th and Linden. And now with the homelessness mixed with the drug use down there, it's kind of dangerous. And it's literally right across the street from Strata, like right across the street. You know, I was driving down the other day and, you know, this homeless guy asked me for if I had any change, and I didn't. And he asked me if I had a cigarette, and I didn't. And he started beating on the hood of my car, you know, and I believe it's desperation. He was definitely homeless, and he was definitely on something. And I don't remember seeing that a few years ago in Allentown. I feel like the homeless population has grown so much to be more outside, what I'm saying, more, you know, not just in Tent City, like it's visible, you can see it. I see people camping out and sleeping on park benches now. I didn't see that before. Been here almost, you know, since I'm a teenager, and I don't remember seeing it like this. You know, I see the growth in the last couple of years where it's just everywhere you look. You know, everywhere you go, the shopping plazas, you know, there was a family out there, you know, with kids, you know, asking for money, and then there's scam artists. So it's like, you don't know who to help and who not to help, but it's everywhere. It's big now. It's huge.
Yeah.
I don't know, Cece, you see that? You're downtown. You know.
Yeah, I do. And it's a delicate, and I guess issue to address from a governmental level, because I mean, you mentioned like park benches. Arts Park is where a lot of folks hang out during the day and at night. And there's an executive director and some other folks, students who attend the bomb school, who have noticed some of the side effects of having folks who are unsheltered sleeping there and hanging out all day, from needles to urinating on the building to feces and things like that. So, I mean, those are real concerns, but yet those are side effects, you know? If the people if they didn't have to be there in the first place, like if there was somewhere else for them to go, to the bathroom, and this is controversial, but something for them to put their needles in, like in Philly, they have these needle receptacles where obviously the ideal would be for them to not use at all. But knowing that that might not happen, Philly and their SEPTA stations and in Kensington Park, they've got these like receptacles where people can put their needles in safely, so that, you know, it's not creating a safety hazard for other people. There's a porta potty now in Arts Park, but dude, they keep it locked. Like, well, what is the point of having a porta potty there if it's locked most of the time? So, yeah. And then it's just one, and if there's one, stuff is gonna build up in there, and people aren't gonna use it anyways. It only gets changed 2 to 3 times a week. So it's like there's all these complex issues. The thing that I struggle with is, from a governmental level, I've already seen how long things take. Like literally, even if something was rushed, the quickest it can be done in terms of policy is like maybe a month or so. But by the time it goes through all the systems and the committees and all that and legal, the quickest it could possibly be is a month. And a month can be life-changing for someone and for a situation. And so the bureaucratic political systems that we have aren't necessarily designed to meet the immediate needs of people. And that's a whole other thing. But I mean, yeah, I think, you know, well, until we start addressing people who some consider disposable, we will never truly be great, because, you know, what's it, the chicken or the rooster comes home to roost, whatever the saying is, that that will happen. So we can continue to build all these little fancy buildings and people can feel good about themselves if they go eat at the Hamilton and they have their little fundraisers there and, you know, have your little cocktail. And yes, that's fun. Everyone deserves to have a nice time. But when a block away, you've got people sleeping outside and you've got people sleeping on benches and you've got 60% of people that don't even know if they're going to eat that night. That's not a city we can be proud of. And that's not, I mean, no, I want to present that city. I want to present that city at conferences, not like back in the, what was a couple years ago, we went to compete to be some like, you know, like city, forget what the title was. We wanted to get some title for like a city on the move or something like that. We didn't get it and we shouldn't have gotten it because we're not a city on the move. We're a city on the move for some people, but for the average person, for most people in Allentown, we're struggling. So we did not deserve that. I'm glad we didn't get it because that would be rewarding the fact that we're pushing people out. We're developing for some, very small, and for most we're not. So I just hope that through the next couple of years, we through community activists like Jeani, through policy at a city level, that we can push Allentown to become a more progressive, inclusive city that actually doesn't just say we value diversity, doesn't just say we love everyone and we respect everyone and we have no limits, but actually puts rules and policies in place that shows that. I'm so sick of hearing people say how much they value diversity, but yet your policies don't show that you do. So until we have policies in place that show we value diversity and we want people here who are diverse, I don't want to hear about how we do it. I don't want to hear it no more. I want to show me. So that's all I got.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I'm going to address Mariska's comment here about the CARES Act rent relief program that will cover up to $750 a month of rent. So that program, I believe, has stopped. There was a certain deadline that you would have to apply for that. I've had several people apply and say that it was closed, but I am going to look into that as soon as we're done with this webinar. I haven't checked it out recently, but that was like in the mid of this whole coronavirus. I think we were even still in the red and they had already closed it. So I'm going to look into that again. Do you know anything about that, Cece?
No, I don't.
Mm-hmm. You know, the city had one, and like Cece mentioned earlier, they closed it like within hours. It was shut down, and I believe it was $3,000 per household, and that money ran out literally in a few hours. It was gone, and they had nothing to piggyback off of that, or didn't like say, okay, we'll use half. Like I thought they should have opened it up in bits and pieces to give many people an opportunity to apply for it instead of just announcing it and then they knew it was going to go fast and letting it go. Maybe they should have, a certain amount of people could apply a month, just kind of spread it out a little bit to give everybody a chance to get that relief, because I know that it did help some families. But I think splitting it up a little bit would have been more beneficial.
Are there any other questions? Any other? I'm going to close this up if there's no other questions. I just thank you so much. Those of you who have been here over a number of times over the past 8 weeks, I want to really thank you for coming back, and I hope you got a lot of information that proved very valuable to you. Again, thank you so much for showing up again and again. And I'm going to wrap it up. So we'll let you know when another set of webinars happens.
Miss Julie?
Yep.
Can I ask for a 30-second moment of silence for the fire victims, Andrea Santiago and Herberto Santiago? Their services were today, and is that okay? Is that appropriate?
Sure, Of course.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, you all. Take good care. Enjoy your day.
You too.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.